On the Spot with Lux Live, talking property, business and success in real estate.
Lots of interesting questions I've got in mind for today, because we want to educate the public a little
Right,
bit.
right. Excited to be here and to hopefully educate some people.
Awesome. And how has it been in the conveyancing world this year? How are you finding 2024?
I always say one thing you can never say about conveyancing is that it's boring, because there's always something. There's always, I don't want to say an issue, but I learn every day, things come up every day and it keeps you on your toes. So one thing it never is, it's boring, but it's evolving and I've been enjoying it. It's been a challenging year. I think the first half of the year was a bit challenging. We've all seen it, but it has gotten better with the repo rate, with the elections. I think we're at a better kind of space.
Okay.
Yeah.
And were you finding the beginning of the year just quiet, like the
I
rest
think
of us?
it was quiet. It was definitely quiet. Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes makes you feel good to hear it. Not that it's good, but just so you know, it's not just your company.
Yeah. It's relatable. Like relatability definitely is like, okay, so it's not just me. Like everybody's experiencing it, so I'm not doing anything wrong. Okay.
Yeah. How long have you been in conveyancing now?
4 years now.
Okay.
Yeah, 4 years now.
Did you always intend to become a conveyancer?
It found me. I didn't speak out to be in conveyancing. It found me prior to getting admitted. I was previously at a conveyancing firm, and then I joined the company I'm with, and that's how I got into it, basically.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what were you thinking when you were studying law? What were your dreams or aspirations?
Going into law, my initial reasons for going into law was because I wanted to be in the United Nations. And when I'm an avid reader, and when I would read books, all these figures who find themselves in positions in the UN always had a legal background. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get a law degree, and then somehow I'm going to find myself at the UN.
Brilliant.
I didn't end up in the UN because the world of practice kind of took over, but that was my initial dream. But I think you don't know what you don't know. And when you land here, you start learning things, you start learning your interests, and you're like, okay, this is something I would like to kind of learn about more. And I continue to grow. And today I'm in conveyancing, and that is my current interest.
Okay. And just for people that don't know, what do you have to study to become a conveyancer? Do you have to first complete a law degree? What is the path?
Right. So in order to be a conveyancer, you have to be an attorney. You have to be an admitted attorney. And in order to be an admitted attorney, you have to get your LLB degree.
Okay.
So you can either do the 4-year program at the university for the LLB degree, or you can do an undergrad BA or BCom law degree and then an LLB degree for 2 years. So in actual note, you have to have an LLB degree. Once you have an LLB degree, you serve your articles of clerkship, which is usually 2 years, and then you write your 4 board exams. And then if you pass, you become an admitted attorney. Once you become an admitted attorney, you can take your conveyancing exams. It consists of 2 exams that you write, and then you get admitted if you pass.
Okay, and then you basically start learning forever again.
Yes, it's you never stop learning. Sometimes you are met. Remember, what you are studying, what you study in theory and what you practice aren't always the same thing, because some things will come up in practice that there aren't really books for, and then you learn in practice.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to go back in terms of becoming an attorney, there are other requirements, so you get your LLB degree, you serve your articles of clerkship, you write your exams, and you also have to do what we call law school. So those are the 4 requirements. I know it's been a while since I got admitted, so the rules change. So for anybody who's studying law right now, you might want to go back to the act and just see what are the current rules to getting admitted as an attorney.
I mean, obviously, like a true
I don't want to say this is what you needed, and somebody comes back and say, but I thought you also needed A, B, C, D.
No,
a while back.
So, just general terms. Everyone just understands, we're just talking here. But it's almost like if you want to go into medicine and then you start specializing, So this is basically what happened.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then when you started with STBB, was it like immediately into conveyancing?
Yes, we're right into it. I remember when I joined STBB, I was already before I joined STBB rather, I was already at a conveyancing firm, and I think that's what attracted them to me and attracted me to them as well. The fact that I already had kind of the conveyancing background foundation, and I went right straight into conveyancing.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm an agent, and often people wonder how many deals an agent does, and obviously depends where you are based. Some places there's more than others, but on average, for those that are wondering, 1 to 2 deals a month is very good. Some agents that are maybe not as doing so well sometimes will do one every 3-4 months. But for a conveyancer, how many deals do you have on your desk at any given point?
Yeah. So I think, with the conveyancer, it's different because now we deal with volumes, right?
Yeah.
We have volumes of files. Right now, I can say within my team, we are actively working on about 45 to 50 deals right now. And this is just my team, not the firm. This is just my team. So we deal with volumes of, so I could say 45 to 50 deals I'm dealing with right now.
Okay.
But that's why I'm within a team. And
because otherwise you can
otherwise you
lose it.
You can lose it, and it's a lot. It's a lot. Take care of 45 matters. You're not just taking care of the matters on its own. You're taking care of the agents involved on the matter. You're taking care of the buyers, the sellers, all the parties involved.
Yeah.
That kind of triples the amount of,
Because, what parties are there to a deal? You're dealing with the buyer, the seller, the agent, but you're also sometimes dealing with the bond attorneys.
Yes, you're dealing with the bond attorneys, the bond cancellation attorneys. Parties involved in a transfer also involve government offices like municipality. So there are so many parties that we have to deal with. That makes it. That's why it's such a lengthy process. Sometimes we get a deal and one of the parties will ask, "So can I expect registration month?" And like, no. Make it more like 3 months. That's usually our turnaround time. But yeah.
And it's so different from overseas. So often people don't understand the process because it depends on which country. Some countries you sign and now the property is no longer yours. And people don't know what to expect.
Interesting to me. I was talking to one of my clients. I can't remember which country it was from, so I don't want to say and then I'm wrong, but it's one of the African countries. And he was telling me that they do their transfers within like 3 to 4 weeks. And I'm thinking, that's interesting. I would love to know what goes into, their transfers that they are able to do that within 3 to 4 weeks. But that's not a reality really in Africa. Yeah.
No, it's just I had some ancestral property that I sold in Bulgaria, and I was so shocked because literally they put an offer, and it was almost like a verbal thing. They just signed the paper, but it was something not like what our offer looks like.
Yeah.
And the moment I accepted it, we all met to sign, and then they shook hands and they said, "Where are the keys?"
Amazing.
So I'm like, oh wow, is that it?
Amazing.
So I'm like, but where's the money? Now kind of expect. So they said, no, it's the other way around here. You first, when everyone signs in front of a notary there, not a conveyancer, it's basically a notary that signs together with the buyer and the seller. And then they said, I expect about 3 to 4 days, and then the bank will release the money. So it's a very funny situation.
Interesting. I would love, I'm sure every country, every jurisdiction does its due diligence in ensuring that, all the legal kind of implications are taken care of. And listen, don't get me wrong, the transfers in South Africa can take a shorter amount of time. Every deal looks different, right?
Yeah.
It can take a shorter amount of time depending on what your deal looks like. But we do see a turnaround time of 3 months at most. Yeah.
I think it's important also because that way the purchaser doesn't buy something that has debt.
Yeah.
Because in the past, I remember many years ago, you could buy basically the municipality debt stayed with the property, and now you have a clearance.
Now we have a clearance certificate that protects the buyer.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, the you say your team, what parties get involved within the team? Do you have like PAs?
Right.
How does it work?
Yeah. Usually in most conveyancing firms or teams, you'll have the conveyancer, the associate, you'll have like in my team anyways, there's myself, there is my co-associate, we have a candidate attorney, and then we also have a paralegal.
Okay.
So usually the candidate attorney, because they're still it's almost like an internship kind of role where they're still learning. They do a bit of both in terms of the professional work and the admin work.
Yeah.
And I must say that within conveyancing, our paralegals, they really do run the show in terms of, they have the contact with the municipality. They know who to call for all the administrative work that is extremely important in ensuring a successful transaction. And then the conveyancers, we're there to ensure that all the legal implications, all the legal stuff are taken care of, because it's so easy to overlook that and think it's not important. Like, I'm going to give an example, right? When there is if we are transferring a sectional title, for instance, we have to obtain a levy clearance certificate, right? That levy clearance certificate doesn't get lodged in the deeds office, right? So the deeds office doesn't check for the levy clearance.
Oh, really?
But we have to obtain that. We cannot register without obtaining that. So we need to ensure that we have that, even though nobody's checking for it at the deeds office. We need to, legally, we need to ensure that we have that. So that's what the conveyancers are there for, to ensure that all the legal stuff are taken care of.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that don't check for, or is it because obviously there's an electrical, in the Cape there's a beetle certificate, all of that. So would the deeds office check against all that, or is it your responsibility?
It's our responsibility to ensure that we have the necessary. I know could be mistaken, but I think the bond attorneys are required to submit that to the bank as well. Yeah. So, but because I'm a transferring attorney, we're just required to have that on file. There are things like that, and then there are things like sometimes that the conveyancer will take care of. For instance, if you have we deal with foreign or people who are overseas, right? And
so South Africans that are based overseas.
Based overseas, so they have to sign. So if you're a seller and you're selling a property in South Africa, you have to sign the documents.
Yeah.
And sometimes what I'll do is I like to discuss the option of those parties who are signing overseas for right now I'm dealing with a matter where the seller is based in a different country, but they'll be in South Africa for like a week. So I'm going to make sure that I have the documents for them to sign. But during that consultation where they're signing the documents, I'm going to discuss the option of them signing a special power of attorney where they're giving the conveyancer or the director at the firm the power to sign any documents on their behalf relating to the transfer. So if anything pops up, because we can't predict what's going to pop up in the future, anything pops up, we're not now delaying the matter by having to send them the documents overseas, them having to go to a notary or to a commission of oath, and then spending money to send us the original documents when we can sign the documents on their behalf. So things like this that you have to kind of think about. We ensure that, we think about those things.
Yes, yeah. And and then when you multiply it by 45 matters, it's quite a lot.
It's a lot.
You need to juggle.
It's a lot. Thank God for the team.
Yeah. So when we call you, with the agents and we say, oh, do you remember Jimmy's transaction? Where are we now? It's normal.
Yeah. Because so sometimes, a lot of times when agents call, they use a lot. Well, in my case, they'll use the property description. I mostly remember the client's surnames.
Okay.
I mostly remember the client's surnames. So I'm like, okay, remind me again, what happened. But thank God, we have everything on file. We have everything, we have a system where I can just type a surname, type a property description, and pulls it out. And I'll remember, or I'll go through the file. But yeah, sometimes you just do think, you just remember, you off the top of your head, but it takes a little bit, just give me 5 minutes to familiarize myself again with the file. Yeah.
Because also when people are overseas, they can't just sign an email or sign digitally, right?
Yeah.
They have to sign in front
of. So depending on the country, so they have to sign in front of a commissioner of oath, or they have to go to the South African embassy or consulate and sign, or notary, and sign in their presence. Yeah. Because those like the notary or commissioner of oath will have to, certify the documents. Sometimes the documents will have to be authenticated, and so on.
So it can be very complicated.
It can be very complicated.
Yeah.
And with some countries, when you're signing, they charge you per page.
Yeah.
So if I'm sending you 10 documents to sign, and then you're being charged per page to sign a document, that can also be costly.
Yeah. So that's where your special power of attorney then.
Yeah, then kicks in if the client is comfortable having us sign on their behalf, just pertaining to the transfer of their property.
Yeah. And when foreigners are buying in South Africa, what is it the same? Obviously, they still have to sign in front of someone.
Yeah, they have to sign in front of someone. If they're in the country, and they just have to have the necessary permits, that allows them, like if it's a passport, whatever necessary permit to legally be in the country, if they're signing in the country. However, if they're outside the country, they can use whatever their passport, because we will use on our documents which get lodged at the deeds office, we'll use their date of birth. Right, on the power of attorney. So they can sign in their country in front of a commissioner of notary, who, depending on the country, whomever, and then send us the documents.
So that way, basically what you're saying is South Africa doesn't have any restrictions for foreigners buying.
No, foreigners can buy. There are legal implications. Like, for instance, if you are, just going back to the signing, if you are buying a property in South Africa and you intend on signing those documents in South Africa, I will require you to have a valid permit, right? Like, for instance, your passport has
visa or work permit or whatever,
to show that you are in the country legally, and therefore you may sign these documents. If your permit has expired, I can't help you sign the documents.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So in other words, if you are an illegal for whatever reason, or lapsed.
And I have to then, report that as a duty. Yeah.
Okay, so that's where your whole FICA.
Yeah, FICA comes in, integrity comes in, ethics come in. Yeah.
Yeah. But if they are overseas,
they can.
If someone is overseas, because we often get questions on our YouTube channel where foreigners watch our video tours of houses. They say, if I was to want to buy a property in South Africa, am I allowed to do that? If someone's sitting overseas, they're allowed to do it. They must just make sure they sign in front of a notary.
Yes, they can absolutely property and invest in property in South Africa.
But then I believe there's also some legal or not legal, maybe more tax implications if they sell. Right?
Yes, there are definitely tax implications. What I do, because I'm not a tax consultant, thank God for how big the firm that I work, STBB, is. We have, whenever there is such a case, I'm able to let them know. That's why it's so important, again, on the onset, when I get the offer to purchase, to have a conversation with the agent. Where is the buyer? What is it? Those conversations allows me to then make notes and be like, okay, I need to refer this client to our tax, attorney who sits wherever, so they can have the necessary conversations with the buyer about the implications of buying. Excuse me. And if, like, when somebody is buying and they're introducing money in South Africa and what that means, those kind of talks, I want to know, so that I can, refer them to the right person.
And it makes it so difficult, because often you get that buyer saying, I want to put an offer, and exactly that money talks. Where's the money coming from? Why are you asking? This is a personal matter. You shouldn't be asking these questions. And this takes us to this whole, back to the FICA, back to why was South Africa grey list? So what do you have to share there from a legal point of view?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because there is a difference between confidentiality and also transparency, right? There are certain things when you're buying property that, as an agent or as an attorney, that I need to know this if we're going to enter into this transaction, because we report to FICA, we answer to FICA, and FICA requires us to ask certain questions, obtain certain documentation. Right. So and your first question about a client refusing to disclose their source of funds, that is a red flag. And okay, it's not our job to obviously arrest them or anything like that, but we have to report that to FICA, like, hey, this is a bit of a red flag that they don't want to disclose this easily. And money laundering is a huge thing in South Africa. There's actually a list of countries that we are told to look out for when we are dealing with conveyancing transactions. You know, some countries are marked as like they're on the red list, high risk countries. And the reason for that is because scammers will use property transactions in order to clean illegally obtained funds.
Right.
That's why we ask, I'm sure you have this as well on your checklist as an agent, what is the source of funds? Especially when you have somebody who's buying for very large amounts of, who's using like cash, large amount of cash. Like, where are you getting these funds from? Where is this coming from? Those questions are important to establish whether it's being introduced in the country legally, whether this, should be flagged or not.
Yeah. But is this something also, because obviously what we ask and the question that the answer that we get is pretty much a face value answer.
Yeah.
You know, if the money is coming from overseas, is there any further checks that someone else does, you know, in terms of, I don't know, is it the Reserve Bank or is it the bank themselves? Or when you receive funds, let's say Joe Soap from country A is buying, but the money doesn't come from Joe Soap's bank account, it comes from someone else's. Do you guys look out for that?
Yes.
Or should you look out for that?
You should look out for that and make notes. Our job is to just report what we've seen, what we've heard to FIC, and that they do all the necessary investigation. But that would definitely be something that you would mark as, okay, a bit suspicious, that you're the one buying, but the money is coming from elsewhere, from X country, and being introduced in the country. So that would definitely be something that I would mark as.
Or if someone's buying and 1 million comes from their account, 1 million comes from a company account. That's something also that you guys as the conveyancers are expected to verify which account it comes from.
Yes. And listen, if the client refuses to disclose certain information, you mark it and then you report it accordingly. It's not you don't say, okay, then I'm not gonna
Yes, I see what you mean.
You just mark it. And in our firm at SBB, for instance, we have the FICA like the FICA manager at the firm. We report, hey, in this transaction the buyer refused to disclose ABCD, or they never brought their original ID, they don't want to bring it they don't want to tell us the source of funds. We are proceeding with the transfer, but we're flagging this to let you know this is something that we should report to FICA.
Okay.
To FIC rather.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Because we usually find as agents, when you start asking the questions,
right?
They get defensive. And then usually, which is a good thing, the ones that were thinking, I'm assuming, to do something untoward, they just disappear. You know?
Yeah.
And usually they're very upset, you know, ask all these questions and, you know, it is really offensive, therefore I'm not going to work with you, whatever. But you kind of know that that's not the case. They just realized, no, but also I think they also realized they got the wrong agent. They must keep looking for someone that's not going to ask the questions.
Yeah. And also, as an agent, I think you can be frank with them like this. I'm required to, but legally I'm required to ask you these questions. This is because we have FIC in place and we are, but legally I'm required to ask you these questions. In fact, I'm asking you, the attorneys will also ask you when you go in to sign the document. So,
yeah. But do you guys see a lot of, strange transactions or reportable stuff?
Have I seen a lot in the last 4 years? I've seen a few.
Yeah.
I've seen a few that were suspicious according to me, but it could have been nothing when it was reported.
Yes.
But because, we have a checklist. If, for instance, client is paying over, just an example, over 3 million rand in cash for this property, you can mark it as, okay, let's maybe check this out. But it could just mean that they got an inheritance.
Yes.
It could mean anything. They won the lotto.
Sure.
It could mean anything. But just to be safe, rather be safe than sorry, I would mark it like, oh, listen, this person is a teacher and they're buying a property that's cost 25 million rand. Maybe look into that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you've never seen like actual cancelled transactions?
I have not seen in my time, no.
Okay. So it's not as bad as sometimes, you think, half of South African property sales are.
I haven't seen one I can't lie. I have not seen one, in my transactions. I have not seen one that crazy now.
It's got bad.
It's good. Yeah, I haven't.
Yeah. But so in general, this whole thing about money laundering, because we're also not understanding how does that work, where people are saying they use purchasing property to launder money. How do they do that? What is the purpose of buying the property?
So I mean, I've never done money laundering, but I would think, I would think that the way they, so you obtain funds illegally, right? And then in order to clean it, you buy property and then maybe you will resell the property. And now it kind of cleans the money because once you've sold
the money,
property. I bought the property and I sold it. That's where the money is from. Yeah. So after going through multiple transactions, the money now becomes clean. And eventually the source of funds will be from the sale of my property. Yeah. When initially it was from illegal.
Something else. Yeah.
That's what I assume, that's how I think it's.
So I mean, ultimately I think in that probably the banks are in a better position to figure out when someone is actually criminal, unlike the attorneys and the agents who don't see where the source of the funds is.
Yeah.
Because if the money came into someone's account and then from there got out into the purchasing a house, all you're seeing is the money came from that person's account. You don't know.
See further back.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. So there isn't really 100% sure check on that.
Not on our level anyway.
From our level.
Yeah, not on our level anyway.
Yeah.
Ours is just to report because the way it apart from us reporting certain transactions, I know that sometimes they can also, when we have our auditing, they can just pull up files, and when they check and they'll ask certain questions. If, for instance, there was a file where 25 million rand was introduced and we didn't ask the necessary questions, where is this money from? How are you paying off this? FIC will impose a penalty on us because why didn't you do your due diligence?
Yes.
We know you're not investigators. You don't need to investigate, but you need to at least ask the questions and mark the file accordingly, so that duty rests on us. Yeah.
So then for those buyers out there that are getting offended, we don't want to be audited, negatively.
Yeah. And those penalties are high. The monies that they impose on, they are very high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And phishing and, all these fraudulent emails. I mean, these days, you don't even know. How do you confirm a bank account anymore?
There was a huge case last year, I think, with one of the big law firms where that happened. So phishing is basically where scammers use intercept emails. Sometimes even on WhatsApp now, even it happens. Intercept.
WhatsApp?
Yeah, it happens on WhatsApp as well.
Oh, wow.
And WhatsApp is not actually I think that it's not as secure as we've maybe thought in the past. So they intercept your emails and obtain information from your clients. For instance, they will. So what I do, right? My process of with clients who are paying a deposit, for instance, I call the client. I tell the client, listen, I discuss whatever I need to discuss with the client, and I also tell them I'm going to send you our bank details on email, right? And then after I send it to you, I'm going to call you again, so you and I can verify that what's on email and what I'm telling you over the phone is the same thing. Because what happens is the scammers intercept our emails and then they change certain details. So, for instance, you'll get an email from me, Noemi, at sbb.co.za. they'll intercept that and change a small detail. Not even, I don't know if you've seen this, but you know the at STVP,
Yes.
at LuxLive, that A, sometimes there are different ways in which you can write that A. They'll
Okay.
just change the A, and anybody who's we are working, you're not gonna
Yeah,
see and
exactly.
notice that, hey, that looks different. So they'll intercept that and then use that specific email and then change the banking details. So now whatever money you make, whatever payment you make, you're not paying to me, you're paying it
Yeah.
to them. That's why everybody involved has a duty to verify the banking details. I do
Right.
that by, yes, I will email the detail, but then I'll call you again and you and I will verify what is on email and what I'm telling you over the phone corresponds.
Right.
So so that's my duty. And then it's also the duty of the I always tell my clients
Yeah.
that throughout the transaction you'll probably make multiple payments. It won't be this one payment. You'll pay the transfer costs at a later stage.
Sure.
The seller will pay the rate figures at a later stage. If at any point you feel the need to verify the details with me once again, pick up the phone and call me, because they can still intercept the emails again and then change the details. So you have to be very vigilant. You have to be very aware and continuously verify those banking details, because you could be then held liable if that wasn't done.
We have many times actually had situations where a person will say you'll get an inquiry and the person will say, I can't talk, just WhatsApp me
all the time
because I'm in a very bad area and the signal is so bad. I can only answer WhatsApp messages, but I cannot speak. Or my microphone is broken and whatever. And from that point of view, yes, we have seen people use WhatsApp and we refused. And everyone in the company knows if the person is not able to physically have a conversation and there is no explanation for this, other than, of course, broken mic or whatever, which is nonsense. We know what. Then we just don't. We say, "I'm sorry, I can't do anything until," and then they'll say, "But just send me the offer." And I mean, we've had so many cases, especially with your higher end, from 20 million up. No, I'm buying this house, and I think to myself, but what normal person just phones a random agent and just buys a 20 million rand house, quickly pays the 20 million, supposedly, which obviously never happens. They just want that signed offer. Why do they want the signed offer? What is it that they're after? When they phone and they want somehow to con the agent into preparing an offer and getting a signed offer from them and a signed offer from the owner. What is the purpose of that?
I don't know. I think and that money never comes, eh? It never
No. So and we've stopped. We've not done that ever because you're supposed to see, but they ask for it and they insist, and you must present my offer to the seller. And once the seller accepts, then I will provide you with where the money is coming from or the funds or whatever. And when you insist that you need the ID copy, all that information, then those people disappear. But I just want to know what is it that they
what they get from it.
What do they get from wanting to have a fully signed offer?
I wonder, because it could mean that fully signed offer could mean something to someone else for them to
steal money or
for them to con or scam and be like, listen, I've bought a property, here's a signed offer.
Yeah.
Could be. I've seen a case where I'm trying to remember the facts of the case. So this person, it's slightly similar. They had a signed offer and a copy of a special power of attorney. So they weren't the owner of the property, right?
Right.
But then they told us that they had a special power of attorney allowing them to sign on behalf of the seller. Now, this deal came to us. It wasn't the firm's, it was a correspondence, right?
Okay.
So the corresponding attorney asked us to sign the client on their behalf. So the assumption is that you've done the necessary FICA. We're just going to request an ID from the client.
Yes.
And then it came to our attention that the initial seller actually never intended on selling the property. This was a completely fraudulent activity on the person holding the so-called special power of attorney. But how it was eventually discovered is that he never submitted the original special power of attorney, because we need the original special power of attorney.
Okay.
But I'm assuming, just to go back to your question, I'm assuming that signed offer would hold weight for whatever con or scam they're trying to do.
Yeah. Because it's a legitimate
seller. It's like, oh, yeah, no, I've bought property.
Yes.
So so I'm assuming that's what it is.
It's look, it can be very stressful, just checking those things.
Yeah.
Even in rentals, we see it. When people have made changes to bank statements. When you're doing your credit checks, and we discovered a way actually in Adobe that you can check if a bank statement's been changed. So now we have turned into an investigator actually, because you just can't take those chances, and you definitely don't want to be dealing with criminals.
Yeah.
Or putting them as a rental somewhere.
Yeah.
So
I've also dealt with cases where. So another thing that I do as like a second check to ensure that the client's funds they're not scammed out of their funds, is I ask them to make a test payment, like make a payment of 100 Rand to me first.
Yes.
And once that reflects into our account, I will let you know, then you can proceed with the rest of the payment. And that person made a test payment that never ever reflected by us. The deposit. It never reflected. We never got it. They sent us a proof of payment.
Yeah.
But the money never reflected on our side. So I'm also very careful about confirm that yes, POP is important, the proof of payment is important, but let it reflect on our account first before we confirm, oh yeah, we've received the funds, oh yeah, we've received the deposit, because those can also be fraudulent.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it helps also when you're a big firm with a lot of conveyancing deals on your table, because then you see by the sheer numbers of deals that you process, you get to notice those things.
Yeah.
And I see often, obviously it's the seller's right to choose the conveyancer, but then sometimes they go, oh, shame, my cousin is doing this on the side, whilst, doing something else. We're going to choose. Yeah. And then you find it can be quite problematic. And one of the worst cases we ever had was the seller chose a friend who was actually a litigation attorney.
Not a conveyancer.
Not a conveyancer. But all this guy did was try to actually break the deal in order to litigate, because and that we discovered after, it was actually, the conduct was actually so shocking that I don't know if the seller decided then to report them for unethical behavior, but we picked up right at the beginning, that everything he was doing was very, very much to start a fight between the two parties. So as a conveyancer, how do you find your role? Because you are chosen by the seller, but you're actually representing both, right?
Yeah. Well, we do represent both during the conveyancing transaction, right? But it's important to note that we act for the seller. We act on the seller's instructions. So because they, like you mentioned, they instruct us, therefore we act on their instructions. But during the process, we're very careful to take care of both parties' interests in the best way possible. And when it turns into conflict, then we advise the purchaser to retain an attorney, because when it turns into like XBB has a litigation department, and if it ever turns into a litigation matter, STBB would represent or would act for the seller, and then refer them to our litigation department. But we do act we act on the seller's instructions.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And you obviously then have to juggle all parties.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. Like we as best as possible, we take care of all the parties involved and look out for their interest. But when there's conflict, we act for the seller.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But that is why also it's important for the seller or for the purchaser also to understand why the seller is choosing the attorney.
The attorneys.
Basically.
Yeah. In South African law and practice, it's been the seller who has the right to choose the conveyancing attorney. However, the buyer can recommend and the seller can say yes, sure. And a lot of the times also the agent influences the choice of conveyancer. So It's
But if the buyer says, use my someone that I've used before, does this mean that this conveyancer then represents the buyer? Or
but they can't. And now it becomes a conflict because as a conveyancer, so what happens is, on the offer to purchase, yes, the buyer will say, hey, I want to use my friend, right? The seller has to agree to that.
Right.
And then the seller says, okay, let's use your friend. I will instruct your friend. So the seller is instructing the conveyancer. The conveyancer therefore has to take the seller's instruction. But now becomes a conflict if
because it's a friend.
The buyer is my friend, and I'm acting for the seller. And now that conveyancer also has to act ethically in letting, either you're going to let your buyer friend know, like, listen, if this turns into conflict, we act for the seller. But
which I think in practice it doesn't happen.
Exactly.
Yeah, in practice it doesn't happen. No.
That's why, as best as we can. And the good thing I'd say for me as a transferring attorney in conveyancing is, when it turns into conflict, when it turns to litigation, I can very easily say, I'm not a litigation attorney. I will refer you to our litigation department.
Yeah.
That I can, easily say that.
So actually it wasn't in your interest in any case to get to that level, because then you will lose the matter. So
there
it's better
to
use a specialist.
Exactly. I win nothing if this turns into litigation matter. So the hope is that it would never turn into that.
Yeah.
And before we even refer to our litigation department, we try every avenue possible. We try to mediate between the parties, and I see it all the time. And also I advise the parties, litigation is costly. It's going to cost you. These are, there's, as a seller, if SVB is representing you on a litigation matter, that attorney assisting you, they are charging you per hour. So it's not like conveyancers, we just charge the purchaser once-off costs, transfer costs. No, litigation is a completely different way of scaling. Yeah.
So on that note of the transfer costs, that you guys are charging, is you can't go further or higher than the prescribed.
Right. We are guided by the law, right? There is a prescribed, and you can go as low as you want.
Yeah.
But you can't go higher than the prescribed, like the prescribed fee. And you will find, I think sometimes we have dealt with cases where the parties will say, but X firm is charging X amount, and they are allowed to do that, as we are also entitled to our fee, as long as it's within the prescribed within the prescribed amount. And if you want to go to somebody who is charging you less, go to the person who is charging you less. I think that remains your decision to make. And a lot of the times also, I would think that firms or attorneys set up their fee according to their experience as well. The resources that they have. We are a very big firm with a reputation, and there is a reason that we charge the fees that we charge.
Because then there's enough backing also.
Exactly.
And you can track everything online and all that.
We have all these, we hold our clients' hands, we have these apps, we have all these resources, and our fees are, what's the word I'm looking for?
In line with it.
There we go. Yeah.
And also in line with, I always say to buyers and sellers, it's all good and well to try and cut corners. If nothing goes wrong, fantastic, but if something goes wrong, it's a disaster. So the risk is so high if something goes wrong. Yes, sure, you save a bit of money here and there. And if you're super lucky, great. But the issue is when it goes wrong, it goes. And what do you see that people make a mistake often on, in terms of, is it the offer, how it's completed, or do people, just misunderstand sectional title versus full title? What do you guys frequently see that needs to be fixed on offers?
The first thing that I see that sellers and purchasers don't understand about offers is that it's a binding contract. Like you cannot just exit and be like, actually, I don't want this anymore. It's a binding contract, and there are implications in when you're wanting to repudiate and cancel the agreement. But going back to your question, what mistakes do we often see? A recurring issue that I've seen in some of the sale agreements that I'm seeing now is not properly signed.
Okay.
So it has to be signed in black wet ink. Our laws do not yet allow for electronic signatures for immovable property anyway. What is addendums, offer to purchases, it has to be in wet ink. I've definitely seen cases when offer to purchase was signed electronically, and I've had to send it back and ask that it be signed in wet ink. It sounds so small, but it's so significant because there's no contract if it's not signed accordingly. There's that. And
what about the witnesses?
Yes, witnesses as well. That's very important.
Do we need witnesses?
Yes, you do absolutely need witnesses. It has to be signed in front of 2 witnesses, actually. So the seller must sign in front of 2 witnesses. Those witnesses must initial everywhere the parties have initialed, and then sign as well. Another thing is wherever there's oh my goodness, I had an offer to purchase where, so by the time it came to us, one of the clauses was amended, right? It was amended, but there was there was only one initial next to it. So the assumption in my head is that one of the parties does not know about this amendment. So they've not agreed to this. And that was the case. So the seller got the agreement to accept. They accepted it, but then they drew a line through a clause and initial next to it, but they didn't send it back to the purchaser so they can also agree to whatever amendment they had made. So things like that, those are the mistakes we see. Like, every clause has to be agreed by all the parties. The agent has to be aware that this has been changed. And then in terms of sectional title versus earth or freehold property. So sectional titles will be a unit within like a community complex, right? While a freehold, we call it an earth, will be a standalone property. With a sectional title, they usually are less costly than earths, sometimes, in terms of buying the property on its own, the property, the purchase price. But they do come with other costs, right? Where in an earth you always pay your rates, for instance. With a sectional title, you'll pay your rate, but you'll also pay levies every month. That's something that buyers should be aware of if they're buying a sectional title, that on top of your rates and stuff, there's also levies that you pay every month to the body corporate. Sometimes buyers should be aware, if the seller is aware, of a special levy that has been raised by the managing agent. So that comes into play where there aren't enough where the managing agents basically will require all the units to pay up a fee in order to take care of anything. Can be a burst pipe, can be anything really, and that they would then raise a special fee that everybody has to contribute for. So that will be there will be a time period to contribute for that, and if the seller is aware, the seller would be aware, they have to disclose that to the buyer.
Right. Yeah. So what if they don't?
If they don't disclose? That is definitely something that the buyer can use to either renegotiate the contract or potentially want to cancel the contract because it was not disclosed to them, and they could argue that if I knew about this, I never would have put an offer. If I knew I have to pay this amount on top of everything else, I never would have put an offer.
And down to that disclosure, then a whole lot of other host of issues can come up. If they didn't disclose issues around the property,
defects.
Defects,
patent and latent defects. So just to differentiate between the two, patent defects are those defects that you can see, you can visibly see, like when you walk into a property, you can see like the crack on the wall or whatnot. Latent defects are more are those defects that you, like a naked eye cannot see. You would require like a professional inspection. Now, a seller has the duty to disclose all known defects to the purchaser, right? And the purchaser also has a duty to inspect the property and inspect, right? So I would assume anybody buying property, I would assume you're going in there and you're looking at the property you're trying to buy so that you can make an informed decision. So you also have a duty to look at the property and identify what you see. Now, if the seller was aware of a certain defect, but they don't disclose it. That's why the property disclosure form is so important.
Yeah.
Because it lists, it allows the seller to disclose of the defects that they are aware of.
Yeah.
So that the buyer can know and make an informed decision.
Then, of course, the big fight comes in when, no, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then that turns into conflict. Like, should they have been aware of this? Depending on what the defect is, would a reasonable person have been aware that there was such a defect, and then therefore have to disclose that to the purchaser? That's why my number one. Obviously, by the time I get an OTP, an agent and the parties have done the assumption, all the checks, and done that.
Sure.
But we still see, like, especially when clients take early occupation, they start discovering things that they apparently never saw when they inspected the property, and then that turns into a thing. And sometimes the parties can negotiate in good faith and be like, okay, I wasn't aware of that, but I will fix that. I'll fix that for you.
Right.
Or let's maybe renegotiate something. You're going to pay for it, or I'm going to pay less X or whatever. But a lot of the times it can be negotiable unless it's not.
So what do you do in a day? Just describe a day of the conveyancing attorney. What do you do from the morning?
Yes. So from the morning, I check my emails, obviously, but we have deals that come in. First, I make sure that every deal is opened on the day that it's received, because what it means is that when it's open and I get the file in front of me, I get to contact all the parties involved. I need to get to know, if it's a new agent, I need to get to know the agent. I need to get to know the seller and the purchaser. I want to know where the seller is. I want to know where the purchaser is, where they're situated, so I can tell them either you're going to sign at my office, or if I have to send the documents to another office, Kimberly, for you to sign there. Are you overseas? Another thing I also look at, when I have a conversation with the seller, when the property you are selling, is it still bonded? How much do you know how much you owe on your bond? Because sometimes you find that they're selling and there's a shortfall, but they didn't disclose it to anybody. And if they're unable to pay that shortfall to the bank, that might cause delays, and the buyer would want to know that. So getting to know the seller's position, where they are, and then I apply for. Sometimes sellers don't know how much they owe the bank still, so then I apply for bond cancellation fee. I request bond cancellation figures so I can determine, hey, do we have, is this fine? There's no shortfall or anything like that. I get to know the buyer. A lot of the times when there's a bonded deal, when the buyer is taking out a bond, they don't realize that they are going to be liable for transfer costs and bond registration costs. So I make sure to explain that to them, that you're going to pay transfer costs and you're going to pay bond registration costs as well. You are liable for that. And if the property is above 1.1 million rand, you're also going to pay transfer duty. So I like to and the seller as well, you're going to pay race figures, levy figures if applicable. I like to let them know, especially of all the costs involved. Because sometimes sellers don't realize that there's actually costs involved for them as well. Yeah. And then I read the OTP really thoroughly to find, if there are any conditions we should be aware of, such as that the seller needed to have provided the approved plans of the property. Have they started with that process? Do they need our assistance to start with the process? I feel like I'm moving away from your question.
But
that's
it's
what I
lot
do daily.
that you have to check.
Yes, I have to check the OTPs. I do a lot of drafting, especially this time of the year. There's a lot of early occupation, especially because we're closing December,
Yes.
and for matters where we can kind of tell that we're not going to register in December, now before 2025, for instance, buyers want to move in already. So I'm
Yes.
having those conversations where okay, let's draft occupational addendums. I'm managing clients' expectations. Do we see registration now, or do we see that in January? I spend my days doing that. So it's a lot of drafting, a lot of checking. I check all the documents that the clients sign. They have to come
Yeah.
to me first to check that they're in order, if anything is missing, and that's what my day looks like. And also doing podcasts.
Yeah, let me guess, which is the fun part?
um the podcasts are more fun. It can get very, I mean, like it can get very stressful, just dealing
Yes.
with clients, dealing with people's emotions, dealing with
Yeah.
people's expectations. It can get stressful, but it's part of the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you still would advise, people out there wondering what career to take.
I think it's a rewarding career. I would say that. Like I said in the beginning, it's not boring. You can
Yeah.
never say that it's boring.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very rewarding career. So if that's something if property law is something you're interested in conveyancing, yeah, it's a rewarding career.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you would still have chosen it for
I still would have chosen it.
knowing what you know now.
Knowing what I know now, I still would have chosen it just because I'm always learning in it. Like I'm always learning. I'm always learning. And not just the legal side of it, but what do you call it? Client relations, how
Yeah.
to deal with people,
Yeah.
how to manage people. There's the marketing side of it. I didn't study marketing,
Yeah.
but I'm learning that on the job that there's a sales aspect to it because you're
Cool.
selling your services because you want people to use you, to use your firm. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So advice for the buyers, advice for the sellers, and advice for the agents.
Advice for the buyers and sellers. Please read your offer to purchase. No, like really read it because
And take it seriously.
and take it seriously because I had a case a long time ago where so if you want, as a buyer, if you want approved plans of the property, you have to insert that in the offer to purchase that, you want that to be issued to you. Unfortunately, it's not like a given that it will be
No, it's
provided
not
to
a
you.
law.
It's not a law.
Yeah.
And we were at the stage where we were signing the transfer documents, and they're like, but we never got the approved plan. I'm like, what did you ask for it? Like, no. I'm like, then I can't. I can ask in good faith the seller that maybe they'll want to provide that, but they're not obliged to because it's not a condition of the offer to purchase. Then why isn't it a condition? Wow. I'm like, I didn't, like, you should, like,
You don't.
you have to read your offer to purchase. And if there's anything else you want to add, have the conversation with your agent. Your agent is there to guide you, have the conversation with them and insert, negotiate. If you want to, if there's something you need, you want, let that be in the offer because we are guided by the offer to purchase. I can't step out of the offer to purchase to grant you certain things. So just I know it sounds so easy, but you'll be surprised at how many people sign documents that that they don't read, addendums that they don't read. Read your documents. Advice to agents. One of them would be going back to confidentiality versus transparency. Really identify which information you should absolutely disclose to your buyer. Like for instance, if you are aware that the seller is selling at a shortfall and that they don't have the means to pay up, that shortfall, they don't have the means to pay the rate figures, you're aware of kind of their financial standing. Let the buyer know that because what this affects the transaction, right? In the sense that it'll cause delays.
Right.
So you don't have to tell the buyer, no, like, this is how, this is what their financials are.
Yes.
But like, there'll be delays because the seller might require assistance in paying up certain things. With the rates, for instance, we can do bridging finance, but that shortfall, where is that going to come from? So that might cause delays as they try and come up with the money. Like have that conversation with the buyer just to let them know registration might not happen at the usual turnaround time. Just to let them be prepared for that. Like have those conversations with
So basically, as much communication as possible.
Yes, know your because another thing is, especially for the agent and from a marketing perspective, because you want these people to come back to you when they're selling their other properties.
Yeah, of
when the
course.
buyer sells in 5 years' time, you
Yeah.
want them to remember you, right?
Yeah.
So I think that any client would remember a sales person who had those conversations, who held their hands,
Yeah.
who didn't let go, even when the matter comes to the attorneys. A lot of times the agents be like, okay, now this is your problem.
Yeah.
But I think from a marketing perspective, that really helps for the clients to remember you and be like, you know what, when I sell this property, I want to sell it through you. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And I guess likewise with you guys, you want us to keep coming back to you.
Absolutely.
Or sellers to keep coming back to you, obviously.
Yeah. I was just going to say, look at me giving the expert.
No, not at all. That's 100%.
Yeah.
There is not one day that we're not learning something new. So there's
Same.
never anyone that can say I'm an expert, and 100%.
Yeah, it's what I'm learning now.
Yeah. So, and I mean, I've been doing property for how many years, and literally today there was something new, that came up.
Keeps you on your toes, right?
So you're like, seriously?
Never boring. That's what I say. It's
6 a.m. and that's what I'm dealing with.
It's never, you can say whatever you want to say about property law. It's never boring.
Okay, well, that's a nice high note to end this on.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay.